The Michigan Man Podcast, episode 142. The Wolverines fall to Ohio State in Columbus on Sunday and drop to number 5 in this week's polls. Michigan beat writer Mark Snyder from the Detroit Free Press is our guest on this week's show. This is the Michigan Man Podcast on GBMW Go Blue Michigan Wolverine for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue, and welcome to this week's show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Everything that could go wrong did on Sunday for the Wolverines in Columbus, as Michigan suffered its first loss of the season. There's no time to dwell on it, though. Up next is another tough road game in Minneapolis against number 9 Minnesota. Coming up on Michigan Game Day, we'll be joined by basketball beat writer Mark Snyder from the Detroit Free Press. We'll get his thoughts on Sunday's game and what he thinks this team needs to do to bounce back. Coach Barnes-Arico has the Lady Wolverines flying high at 14-2 and off to the best start in program history. They had a nice win against Wisconsin over the weekend. Coach Red Berenson's squad continues to struggle, even at Yost. This past weekend, they dropped a pair to Alaska Fairbanks. Coach says his team is struggling and it is fragile right now. Can they turn it around? It would appear to be a tall order at this point, based on what we've seen from this young team so far this year. Football flipped another 2 recruits in the last week, and now has 26 verbal commitments for the class of 2013. In just a couple of weeks, National Signing Day will be upon us, and there is one player Michigan fans are waiting to hear from, number 1 rated running back Derek Green of Richmond, Virginia. He is slated to make his decision known on January 26th. We'll have more on these stories later on Wolverine Quick Hits. We all enjoyed Michigan's 16-0 run to start the season, but realistically we knew it couldn't go on. The Big Ten is just brutal this year, and playing on the road you have to bring your A game. And as we saw Sunday, Michigan failed to do that. Coming up, Michigan beat writer Mark Snyder joins us on Michigan Game Day to discuss that and more. Here on the Michigan Man Podcast on GBMW Go Blue Michigan Wolverine. With us today is Michigan beat writer Mark Snyder from the Detroit Free Press to talk a little Michigan hoops. Mark, great to have you back on the show.
Glad to be with you.
Well, Mark, everything that could go wrong did in the first half against Ohio State on Sunday. Do you think it was Michigan being, a little too amped up for the game with everything that was on the line, or was this just the first reality check for everyone of what it's going to be like in the Big Ten this season?
I think you're right on the first part. They were pretty amped up. Beeline kind of admitted that after the game, that the players were really excited. And that's one part of having a young team, is that when they get that excited, they don't know how to handle it. Older teams can get that excited and be ready for a game like that because they've been through it. But Michigan hadn't been through something like that, and I think that maybe they'll be better able to handle it, later in the season.
Well, watching this team through the first 16 games, I thought it was going to be maybe impossible for teams to stop this offense if Burke, Hardaway Jr., and Stauskas were all on. And I thought it would be extremely difficult if just 2 of them were hot. But Ohio State came out and they attacked all 3 of those guys on the perimeter very effectively, like we haven't seen so far this year, didn't they?
Yeah, they were very physical with them, and I think that's something that, when you're a younger team, that's the other thing. When you're a younger team, then you can't handle the physicality the same way because your body's not as developed, and that's where Stauskas kind of got it. He's got to learn to be able to fight through those things, and he's got to be mentally strong. And I think that, I've long contended this season that Stauskas was the key to the season, and he's the difference between an average team and an elite team, and I think we saw that yesterday. I mean, Stauskas didn't score, and, they lost by 3 points. However they got to that point, that was the final result. They lost by 3 points. Stauskas didn't score after being in double figures in every in each of the previous 15 games.
Yeah, and I think as poorly as Michigan played, we have to give credit to Ohio State. I've seen them several times this year, and I know they're a very talented team. They're a good defensive team, but they took that defense to another level in the first 20 minutes, didn't they?
Well, there's something to be said for motivation, and there's something to be said for, putting all your energy into a certain game. They knew how to handle that game. They were veterans, as Beeline had mentioned after the game. Ohio State is a team that didn't play any freshmen yesterday, and Michigan played 5 freshmen. Well, that's great if they're talented freshmen, and that's what's gotten Michigan to this point. But, you got to take the bad with the good, and in some level, that's what happens. And I think that they kind of realized yesterday that having all those freshmen is great, but it's not necessarily, going to solve all of your problems. You're still going to have to deal with some other issues.
Well, Trey Burke has struggled against Ohio State. Seems like at least 3 of the times that he's matched up with them in his young career. Last year he was playing against Sullinger, and like he said, that was something he was thinking about. Yesterday, of course, you're going back home, but is it more that Aaron Kraft is really a big-time defender that's maybe the issue there?
I think that might be what we saw yesterday. Yeah, I think that maybe it is less mental with Burke and maybe more physical. That there's a guy out there who knows how to handle him, who kind of understands what Trey wants to do and can match him. I mean, obviously Kraft couldn't match him at the other end. He can't score, but he doesn't need to. In that game, that Deshaun Thomas had enough to take care of the points, and Kraft hit a jumper too early, and that may have even gotten in Trey's head a little bit. And I think that, the mental thing, I don't think Trey was so overwhelmed mentally. I think it was more the physical thing. No one's played him like that physically this year, and maybe that's a prescription for other people that he'll have to adapt to.
On the television, or on the telecast, I should say, Mark, on Sunday, Clark Kellogg mentioned several times that when Hardaway Jr. gets it going, this is a completely different team. Do you agree with that?
I do, but I think that when he gets it going, I think you got to look at when he gets it going. I mean, I think a lot of times, he's gotten it going in situations where they didn't need it quite as much. I think that he's a supplementary player, and he hasn't proven yet that he's the primary player, and that's Burke's role at this point. And I think that Tim has to kind of be able to sense that things aren't working yesterday and take over. Where he was 1 of 8, by halftime, and I think that was a big key yesterday because when you have multiple elite scorers, well, they have to take turns leading when the other one's struggling. That's why you have multiple elite scorers, and that's when Burke was having problems yesterday. That's where Tim needs to kind of take it up and be more aggressive instead of settling for jump shots, maybe.
Well, our guest on the show today is Mark Snyder from the Detroit Free Press, and we're talking Michigan hoops, particularly about the loss to Ohio State on Sunday. Mark, I'm not one of these guys that takes positive from losses, not a lot anyway, but I thought that Spike Albrecht's performance was a positive. He looks like he could be that surprise addition to this very talented freshman class, doesn't he?
Yeah, I think so. I think what Spike did yesterday was valuable in the first half, especially to settle them a little bit. But Spike's talents are obviously limited compared to some other guys, and the reason Spike played yesterday was because they tried Karis LeVert earlier, and he was a mess. He couldn't handle the stage. He had a couple turnovers. He wasn't as aggressive as we've seen in other spots, and I think that was part of the reason they went to Spike, which is fine. I guess that's why you have depth, but obviously LeVert can do a lot more things, so they would prefer to play LeVert in that situation because he can defend better and be more athletic. Spike hit that three-pointer, and Beeline said after the game that it wasn't exactly the best shot that he wanted him to take. I mean, he hit it, but that's more moxie than good strategy, I think.
Yeah, well, watching it, the one thing with everyone being so discombobulated for a freshman, he really had his head in the game, though.
Yes, definitely. I think that, and his steadiness is a big deal, and I think that that's going to prove to be a big deal down the road. It shows that at least you got someone who can run things when Burke isn't in there. And I think that Michigan actually played well with him and Burke in there together, which is an interesting lineup there. I don't know how often they can go to that and for how long stretches, but they know, I think yesterday they learned they can go to that and trust it against a team that's being physical because they got 2 ball handlers, and then it kind of takes some of the pressure off of Burke in that situation. And I think that Burke's, it's another issue with Burke, but he's got to realize, too, that in some of those situations he's got to be able to find other people because he can't create for himself. I mean, he and Hardaway, they ended up shooting something like 9 of 28 or something like that from the field. That just can't happen. You're not going to win any games like that.
Well, over on the boards, Michigan played the Bucks even, 30 rebounds apiece, which was nice to see. And it didn't seem to me like they were getting handled physically like they did last year by Ohio State, by Michigan State, and a few other teams. Do you think having some of the bigger bodies down low, like McGarry, and getting Horford back to help Jordan Morgan are really going to help this team down the stretch in a very physical Big Ten?
It should, and I think that the biggest evidence of that may come on Thursday. We'll get to see how that plays out at Minnesota. Minnesota is has a lot of size. They hit the glass really hard, and you're going to be in another hostile environment. So if Michigan can go in there and rebound with them, then maybe they can show that they're physical. But I think that Michigan had some issues with aggression, and they got some rebounds yesterday, but they didn't go right back up with them. They tried to kick out, and they shot a couple threes, and I think they needed to be more aggressive, especially, and this isn't even more of an offensive question, but you saw down in that stretch after they tied the game at 46, they settled and took a couple jump shots instead of going to the basket. At the other end, Ohio State went to the basket, and that ended up being the difference.
With Horford, Mark, he got just a few minutes yesterday. Is Coach Beilein just trying to ease him back in? Yeah. I know he's got to be rusty, but do you think that knee is a lot better right now?
I think that, you hit it on the head. Maybe not even the knee, maybe even just more conditioning. He hasn't played since December 15th. So, those 2 minutes, they wanted to get him in there, and they're going to try to give him more and more, as he goes forward. And I think that'll make for a nice balance, and give them more depth up front. And on days when, either Morgan's not being as aggressive as he needs to be, or McGarry's in foul trouble, or whatever it is, at least there's another option there. And they'd like to use, play two posts if they can in some of these games. And I think that that's something that maybe you'd see if when they play Ohio State again. But I think at this point, Horford's body's just not ready for that kind of situation.
Well, Thursday night it's up to Minnesota to play Tubby Smith's Gophers. I've seen them several times, and they are impressive. It's a better club than I thought. Is it overdoing it to say, especially this early in the season and coming off a disappointing game Sunday, that this is a must-win game for Michigan?
Well, I don't think we deal with must-wins in the first half of the Big Ten schedule. You notice Mata said the other day, he was just talking about, where they are at this year, and he said he remembered, a year recently where Ohio State had started 1-4, and they still won the Big Ten. So I think that, this is so competitive, people are going to lose. But I think it's a statement to Michigan, for Michigan to itself. If they lose another game to a ranked team on the road, it starts to get in their head. I think that's what happened last year. You look at went through these numbers yesterday. They have not beaten a team ranked above 25 on the road since 2005. That's something you remember, and you need to prove that. You need to get out there and win one of those games to prove it. Just one, but until they do, I think that's still an albatross. It's still hanging over them, and they need that for their own confidence, let alone showing other people that they can do it.
Well, Sunday was, was the first taste of adversity for this young team this year. So to me, the question this week and moving forward is, how does this young team respond to that adversity?
I think that Burke will play a better game. He doesn't usually play two poor games in a row. Obviously, taking out the Ohio State factor usually makes a big difference. He played very well against Minnesota last year. Minnesota is a similar team. Obviously, they didn't have Mbakwe at that point, last year, but they have a similar team to what they had last year. He put up 30 on them in the tournament. So, they'll be motivated, but at the same time, he has an ability to get to the basket. And I think taking the mental Ohio State element out and the craft element out maybe makes a little bit of a difference with him.
Well, we've only seen 2 weeks of Big Ten action so far, Mark, but I was thinking, when the season started, you looked at these teams and said, 4 losses might win the conference. But after watching the first 2 weeks and getting to see some of these teams, I'm not so sure anymore. Do you think that maybe 5 or 6 losses might be what the eventual Big Ten champion has?
I think a 6 is a really high number, but I think it's hard with the road play. I think some of the one plays will come into factor who you're playing and when you're playing them. You got to remember Michigan too. They lost by 3 points yesterday with a very young team, and regardless of that they were down, they had a shot to win the game on the road, the game where they played again very poorly. So I think that Michigan and Indiana are still the class of this conference. Minnesota has an opportunity to show that. I think Minnesota can get into that group. We saw that at their game in Indiana, where same thing as Michigan. They got down by a lot, and they came all the way back, showing that Indiana is vulnerable too. So I think that the top of the conference really is on another level. But I mean, they're going to have people have to stay healthy. Injuries will impact this, but I think 6 is a pretty high number. I'd say 4 or 5, even though everyone almost has one at this point in a loss.
I think we all agree, though, it's going to be brutal, especially on the road in the conference this year. So it's going to be a fascinating week, and starts Thursday against the Gophers. Our guest today has been Mark Snyder, Michigan beat writer from the Detroit Free Press. Mark, as always, it's been a pleasure having you on the show, and we look forward to the next time.
Thank you very much. Anytime.
Stay tuned for Wolverine Quick Hits coming up next on the Michigan Man podcast here on GBMW Go Blue, Michigan Wolverine. On Wolverine Quick Hits today, Michigan men's basketball, of course, back in action tomorrow night up in Minneapolis against the number 9 Golden Gophers, a big test to see if the young Wolverines can bounce back from that very disappointing loss to Ohio State on Sunday. Using a career-high 19 points from senior guard Jenny Ryan and 9 points over the final minute of the game, the University of Michigan women's basketball team won its 9th straight game with a 54-43 triumph against Wisconsin on Sunday afternoon at Chrysler Center. With the victory, Michigan continues its best start in program history at 14-2 and moves to a perfect 3-0 in conference play for the first time ever. Senior forward Rachel Sheffer added 9 points on 4 of 6 shooting and 7 rebounds. Senior forward Nia Jordan chipped in 7 points and 6 rebounds, while sophomore guard Nicole Elmblad also contributed 7 points to go with 3 boards. The Wolverines hit the road for the next contest, traveling to Evanston, Illinois to take on Northwestern tomorrow night. Tip-off time is scheduled for 7 p.m. Michigan now again 14-2 overall, 3-0 in the Big Ten. Michigan hockey dropped the second game of the CCHA weekend series and was swept by the University of Alaska Fairbanks by a score of 4-1 on Saturday night at Yost Ice Arena. After reducing Alaska's lead to 1 in the middle frame, the Wolverines failed to keep the Nanooks at bay and were blanked in the final period. The matchup contained 15 penalties, with UAF responsible for 8 and Michigan 7. 3 of the goals scored were power play goals, and Jacob Truba's lone tally, also a power play, was his 7th marker of the season. The Wolverines will next travel to Sault Ste. Marie to face Lake Superior State for a 2-game CCHA series starting on Friday. The puck is set to drop at 7:35 p.m. at Taffy Abel Arena. Michigan now 7-13-2 overall, 4-10 in the CCHA. It's going to be interesting to see if this young team can rebound and start putting it together. In football news, a couple of stories from Michigan beat writer Kyle Meinke over at mlive.com. He says that Michigan has flipped its second Big Ten recruit in 3 days. Illinois cornerback commit Rion Dawson committed to the Wolverines Monday. The Trotwood, Ohio Madison High School standout is a 3-star prospect, according to Scout, and unranked according to Rivals. His pledge follows that of offensive lineman Dan Samuelson, who joined the Wolverines on Saturday after originally committing to Nebraska. Dawson is the 26th member of the Wolverines' 2013 recruiting class, which ranks number 5 according to Rivals, number 1 according to Scout, and number 7 according to ESPN. He is the 6th defensive back to commit to Michigan. 6 members of the class already have enrolled, some of whom will be backdated to the 2012 class. That is expected to leave room for at least 1 more commitment. Michigan remains the leader to land the nation's top tailback, Derek Green of Richmond, Virginia. He is expected to decide between Auburn, Tennessee, and the Wolverines on January 26th. In another story coming to us courtesy of Kyle Meinke, Michigan began the 2012 season ranked 8th in the country, but as we know, stumbled to an 8-5 finish. Expectations won't be nearly as high for 2013. The Wolverines lost 5 starters from their defense and 6 from their offense, including Denard Robinson, and early rankings for next season slot them anywhere from 16th to unranked. Here's a look at some of the early top 25s out there. Mark Snyder pegs Michigan 23rd and behind Ohio State, Wisconsin, Nebraska, and Northwestern. Reasoning: the Wolverines are hoping they'll make the same improvement other recent teams have made in their coach's third season. Michigan went 8-5 in Coach Brady Hoke's second season and never really seemed to recover from its 41-14 loss to Alabama in the opener. The good news is junior Devin Gardner got some experience at quarterback after Denard Robinson was injured midway through the season. Gardner went 3-2 as a starter, completing 59% of his passes with 11 touchdowns in the 5 games he played under center. 6 starters are coming back on defense, but they'll miss cornerback J.T. Floyd and safety Jordan Kovacs. Michigan's schedule won't be easy in 2013, with games at Penn State, Michigan State, and Northwestern, and home games against Notre Dame, Nebraska, and Ohio State, but it will be fun. ESPN.com's Adam Rittenberg ranks Michigan 22nd. Fellow Big Ten blog scribe Brian Bennett is slightly higher on the Wolverines, slotting them at 19th. So the season just ended, and already the speculation on this coming fall is going full steam, so it's, as usual, going to be interesting. Don't forget to become a member here at GBMW. Visit www.gbmwolverine.com and sign up for membership today. Benefits include email reminders when a story is published or a mailbag question is answered. You also need to become a member for full participation on our always interesting message board. As a member here on GBMW, you can also take part in our popular Monday Night Live chat with E-Rock Wolverine, Coach BT, Maze Man, Doc for Blue, World's Wolverine, and our hockey guru, Jostmeister. The Monday Night Live chat takes place at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, so become a member and check it out. Join GBMW today and get your daily fix of Maize and Blue news and conversation. Then each Wednesday you can check out the Michigan Man Podcast. The show is now available as an Android app, which can be purchased from the Android App Store at Amazon.com. If you're an Apple person, you'll find our app in the Lipson Toolbox at the iTunes App Store. If you listen to the show on your Apple device, please take 1 minute to give us a review. It really does help a lot. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your comments. If you'd like to have your Maize and Blue opinion heard, give us a call at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Then leave an audio with your thoughts on recruiting, Michigan hoops, hockey, or anything that's on your mind. Just give us your name, tell us where you're calling from, and then give us your opinion. If you'd rather send us an email, our address is the Michigan Man Podcast at yahoo.com. That's the Michigan Man Podcast at yahoo.com. We'd love to hear from you, so give us a call or drop us an email with your thoughts on anything Maize and Blue. Thanks again to our guest today, Michigan beat writer Mark Snyder from the Detroit Free Press. Next week, we'll stick with Hoops Talk. We hope to have Rod Beard, Michigan beat writer from the Detroit News, on the show and get his take on how the Wolverines fared over the weekend. And don't forget that during the first 2 weeks of February, we'll be breaking down the 2013 football recruiting class player by player. We'll have more news on that for you in the coming weeks. So until next week, I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Thanks for tuning into the show. Take care, and as always, go Blue. Thanks for listening to the Michigan Man Podcast on GBMW Go Blue Michigan Wolverine. You can find us on the web at www.gbmwolverine.com. That's www.gbmwolverine.com. For audio posts or other fan feedback, please call our listener line at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Email fan feedback to the Michigan Man Podcast at yahoo.com. That's the Michigan Man Podcast at yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast on GBMW Go Blue Michigan Wolverine is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan. The Michigan Man Podcast is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!